The following is a recut of my original 4-part Masquerade series, which you can still find in my videos list. It contains identical footage with no additions, so hopefully this won't be taken down. Japanese pro wrestling promotion Dragongate has finally come back to North America. But to those who haven't been watching, you may not know why this is such a big deal, or why you should go out of your way to see them. The story in this video series focuses on the rise of one of the most talented performers in wrestling today, and one of the most interesting factions and characters in recent memory: Masquerade and their leader Shun Skywalker. While North American wrestling promotions are mostly focused on spectacle and drama, pro wrestling in Japan has more of a sports-like presentation, called puroresu, and it's famous for the hard-hitting strong style. New Japan Pro Wrestling is Japan's #1 wrestling promotion. Number 2 is considered to be Dragongate, but it really depends on who you ask, because everything that isn't New Japan is considered fairly niche. In the 1990s, smaller and faster wrestlers often found it difficult to stand out in Japan, so many of them began performing in other global markets like Mexico, where the lucha libre style is more focused on speed and high-flying acrobatics. So after finding success in Mexico, several junior heavyweights brought lucha libre back to Japan, like Gran Hamada, the Great Sasuke, and Ultimo Dragon, creating the hybrid-style lucharesu. If you're not familiar with the Toryumon or Dragongate promotions, you may at least be familiar with its founder, Ultimo Dragon. You've probably also seen some of Dragongate's biggest talents wrestle elsewhere, like former headliners Shima and Shingo Takagi, and many wrestlers in American promotions who came up through Dragongate. Ultimo Dragon launched Toryumon Japan in 1999 as a spin-off of his original Toryumon Mexico promotion. It was later renamed Dragongate when Ultimo left to focus on wrestling in North America. But Dragongate has always retained the same major elements. Much like Mexico, masks are also very important in Dragongate. To rip off someone's mask during a match results in immediate disqualification, and sometimes they're put on the line in apuestas matches. Luchadors typically don't reveal their real names or faces to the public, so to lose your mask is the death of your character, and revealing your identity to the world. Dragongate has a training dojo in Kobe, Japan, which produces a small class of new wrestlers every year. Wrestlers from the same class will feud with each other for several years as generational rivals. And a generation war between almost the entire roster lasted through all of 2020, with Toryumon veterans feuding with the Dragongate generation. Dragongate is big on faction warfare. Factions or stables are pretty common in wrestling, but in Dragongate the roster is almost entirely divided into units, which are color-coded and share a similar theme. Like anywhere else in wrestling, Dragongate has over-the-top characters and fictional drama, but in addition to being some of the best junior heavyweight action in the world, they're often hailed for their innovative booking and well-written storylines. And when Dragongate's stories are good, they're really, really good. So, who is this guy Shun Skywalker everyone's talking about? Shun Watanabe debuted in 2016 and was quickly renamed Shun Skywalker due to his high-flying ability. Despite the name, his character has nothing to do with Star Wars. Rather, he was nicknamed the Man Who Flies Over the Sky. Toryumon veteran Masaki Mochizuki formed a unit called Mochizuki Dojo, where he mentored nearly all of the graduates from the 2016 to 2018 classes, including Shun Skywalker, Hyo Watanabe, later renamed Hyo, Yuki Yoshioka, and the debuting rookie Kota Minoura. Meanwhile, Hong Kong wrestler Jason Lee had debuted and joined the Maximum faction as one of the fastest rising juniors in the business, following an appearance in WWE's Cruiserweight Classic tournament. Finally, though he was unaffiliated with a unit at the time, the other 2018 graduate was Dragon Dia. Dragon Dia is the protege of Toryumon veteran Dragon Kid. And what else can you really say about Dragon Kid other than he's 46 years old, he still looks like this, and he still moves like this? Dragon Kid was himself the protege of Ultimo Dragon, making Dragon Dia the third generation of the company's flagship Dragon character. In 2019, Shun expressed a desire to wrestle independently, and kicked himself out of Mochizuki Dojo. He wrestled unaffiliated for the rest of the year, before going on excursion to Mexico along with Yuki Yoshioka, who both wrestled in several independent lucha promotions. Yoshioka leaving was explained as professional jealousy over the rookie Dragon Dia getting all the attention, but Shun pretty much left without a word. By the time Shun Skywalker returned to Japan by himself in November 2020, the top title belt in the company, the Open the Dreamgate Championship, was held by Eita, leader of the top heel unit, RED. RED's main strategy was strength in numbers. They continuously grew, drawing in multiple members from other units, but they'd have trouble within their ranks too, kicking out members and some turning against them. Shun immediately challenged Eita, and to everyone's surprise, he won the belt in his first match back from excursion. As the new champion, Shun Skywalker announced in December 2020 that he'd be handpicking members for his new unit called Masquerade. This included Kota Minora, one of his former teammates from Mochizuki Dojo, as well as former Maximum member Jason Lee and the independent Dragon Daya. They later added a debuting rookie La Estrella. Masquerade entered the ring in elaborate robes and jester masks inspired by the Venice Carnival, and all of them were young talents in their 20s, and they were coming for RED. Shun Skywalker would hold the Dreamgate title for 259 days. Along the way, he defeated several members of RED in title defenses, but other feuds between RED and Masquerade ran concurrent to Shun's title reign. First, one that calls on a history dating all the way back to Toryumon. In the early 2000s, Dragon Kid was embroiled in a generational feud with the black-clad Darkness Dragon, and their rivalry lasted for several years. But in late 2020, with Dragon Kid's protege Dragon Daya, a similar mysterious rival showed up when RED introduced their new secret weapon, Daya Inferno. He wore an elaborate dragon costume and never spoke, but he seemed obsessed with defeating Dragon Daya. This wasn't entirely out of the ordinary, since RED had repeatedly brought in masked demons as new members to disguise an impending heel turn. Later, Dragon Daya, Jason Lee, and La Estrella won Dragon Gate's Trios titles, the Open the Triangle Gate Championship. These are considered the symbol of unit supremacy in Dragon Gate. So for most of spring and summer 2021, with 4 of the 5 members holding the biggest championships in the company, Masquerade was the faction to beat. But when you're at the peak in wrestling, the only place to go is down. At Dragon Gate's biggest annual event, Kobe Pro Wrestling Festival, also known as Kobe World, Shun Skywalker had 2 title defenses in 2 nights. Both are excellent matches that I highly recommend, and they're free on YouTube, so check the description for the links. Shortly after losing the belt, Shun Skywalker began feuding with another RED member, a luchador from Mexico named Diamante. Not that Diamante, this Diamante. Diamante would repeatedly steal Shun's mask, after which his Masquerade teammates would rush to cover his head with a towel to keep his identity secret. This culminated in what was supposed to be a feud-ending match in September 2021. However, Diamante attacked Shun before the bell and brutalized him for several minutes before a referee called off the match. Other members of RED would also get the best of the Triangle Gate champions. Eita, Hyo, and Kaito Ishida would leave Masquerade literally stacked up in a pile, and even stole the Triangle Gate belts until Dragon Gate's general manager Ryo Saito demanded they be returned. The belts would be up for grabs in the first match of Dangerous Gate, the same show where Diamante destroyed Shun Skywalker, and Masquerade would lose the belts for real this time. Kota Minora had also failed to capture the Dreamgate title, so it seemed like Masquerade had suddenly hit a wall. After winning the Triangle Gate titles, RED was on top. Young rookie RED member SB Kento had also won the Open the Brave Gate Championship, Dragon Gate's middleweight title belt, and their largest member Kai began to challenge Yamato for the Dreamgate title. But something curious had been happening to RED over time. Aside from their leader Eita, no original members of RED were left in the unit. All had either been kicked out or betrayed the unit, or had left the promotion. During this time, Hyo gained notoriety for his great brain, becoming the strategist of the group. This led to some tension, especially when Eita made appearances in another company, Pro Wrestling Noah. But for now, they were riding high with multiple title belts, with other teammates on fast tracks to gaining the rest of the belts in the company. After injury setbacks and pandemic rescheduling, Daya Inferno began to refocus on his obsession with Dragon Daya. Dragon Daya began to call out Inferno, saying he knew who he really was under the mask. But it was Shun Skywalker who surprisingly came to Inferno's defense, saying it was rude to reveal a masked luchador's identity. But Dragon Daya insisted that Inferno was obviously his old rival Yuki Yoshioka, who was Skywalker's roommate during his Mexican excursion. Again, Shun defended him, saying he's talked to Yoshioka recently and that he's still in Mexico. What was supposed to be the final encounter between the two Dayas ended in a double disqualification after interference. Dragon Daya even pulled off Daya Inferno's mask, briefly exposing him before RED covered him up. Ryo Saito decided to book a tag team match for the December Korakuen Hall show between all 4 masked wrestlers, where only the loser of the pinfall would be forced to unmask. Everything pointed towards Daya Inferno losing the match and his mask, but Inferno didn't even figure into the finish. The end of the match saw Shun Skywalker beaten down by Diamante, his mask twisted around to the side, partially obscuring his vision. And then...
Wait a minute! Shun, I don't know if he fell forward, he set Daya into the false finale!
In the aftermath, an emotional Dragon Daya unmasked himself. Shun Skywalker stood away from the rest of Masquerade, ashamed by his own actions. This prompted another unexpected moment. Dia Inferno grabbed a microphone and spoke for the first time. He said, without Dragon Dia, Dia Inferno no longer has any reason to exist, and revealed that he was indeed Yuki Yoshioka. Dragon Dia and Yuki Yoshioka both disappeared, and were not seen again for over a month. It was unknown whether either one of them would continue with their respective factions. While initially appearing as a blind accident while his mask was turned, Shun Skywalker later admitted that he shoved Dragon Dia on purpose, sacrificing his partner to save his own mask. For the rest of December, the remaining members of Masquerade clearly wanted nothing to do with Shun for his betrayal of their teammate. Jason Lee mentioned that he and La Estrella were both neutral about it, but they clearly didn't approve of Shun screwing over Dia. But Kota Minoura was visibly irritated and considered leaving the group entirely, especially after he heard from Dragon Dia via text message. "I'm okay, but don't come looking for me." Shun Skywalker became increasingly desperate to save Masquerade from crumbling apart. He even started wearing Dragon Dia's colors, pink and white, and he vowed to get back the Triangle Gate titles that the unit lost to RED in September. Kota Minoura and Jason Lee were less than enthusiastic, but at the following Korakuen Hall show, the tension between RED led to poor teamwork, which Shun capitalized on to win back the belts for Masquerade. Afterward, he thanked his partners, who were hesitant to celebrate with him. Shun Skywalker devised a solution to the tension in Masquerade, a one-on-one match. If Minoura won, Shun would leave Masquerade and vacate the Triangle Gate titles. Minoura accepted, and on December 26th at Final Gate, the year-long war between Masquerade and RED was only represented in one match, with Diamante beating La Estrella. But elsewhere on the card, RED members Hyo and SB Kento won the Open the Twin Gate tag team titles, and finally Kai beat Yamato for the Dream Gate title. The only belts RED didn't have now were the Triangle Gate, and two of the three current champions were now fighting each other. During the Shun Skywalker Kota Minoura match, Shun Skywalker unmasked himself and threw his mask into Kota Minoura's hands before covering up his own face. This gave Shun the disqualification win, forcing Minoura to stay in the group. Shun had taken off the very mask that he had sacrificed Dragon Dia to save, in order to stop Masquerade from disbanding. He then spoke with a towel draped over his head, repeating over and over that he did what he had to do, and that keeping Masquerade together was the most important thing. Kota Minoura, of course, was very unhappy. Shun Skywalker, on the other hand, seemed almost unhinged. In January 2022, RED had been throwing chalk powder into the eyes of their opponents to gain cheap victories. At one point, Hyo accidentally threw the powder into Kaito Ishida's eyes, costing him the match. On the next show, Eita had the powder and was going to throw it at Kota Minoura, and then deliberately threw the powder in Hyo's face anyway. Meanwhile, though Shun Skywalker's actions had seemed merely cowardly on the surface, something else was happening. Shun was clearly losing his mind. While Minoura said he heard from Dragon Dia via text message, Shun began talking about how Dragon Dia spoke to him in his dreams, saying that he was coming back and he wanted Masquerade to be whole again. During Masquerade's entrances, Shun now obsessively wore all of the group's entrance robes and masks at once, then attempted to distribute them to each member, who all refused. He would then place them around the ring anyway, and continue doing the group's full entrance routine by himself. Then came the reason I wanted to make this in the first place. January 12th, 2022. In what was supposed to be the final match of the night, Shun Skywalker, Kota Minoura, and Jason Lee defended their Triangle Gate belts against the RED contingent of Eita, Hyo, and Ishida. The dynamic of this match was unlike any trios match they've ever had. On Masquerade's side, neither of Shun's partners wanted to tag him. On RED's side, neither of Hyo's partners wanted to tag him. This left what was essentially a Hyo versus Shun singles match with the occasional forced tag to bring in the rest. RED attempted to cheat, but when Minoura got a hold of their weapon, he hit Shun by accident, leading to the end of the match and the loss of the Triangle Gate titles back to RED. For a brief moment, RED held all the gold in the company. What followed was an absolute meltdown by Shun Skywalker, where he finally snapped. He screamed repeatedly at Minoura to admit it was all his fault, while Minoura maintained that it was an accident. But Shun couldn't accept this and completely broke down into a tantrum. Finally, Hyo intervened and offered Shun a spot in RED instead, calling all the way back to their history in Mochizuki Dojo. But then... Shun Skywalker, previously obsessed with keeping Masquerade together, had finally abandoned his team and joined the enemy. But that wasn't the end. Eita and Ishida entered the ring, yelling at Hyo for deciding on his own to recruit a new member, especially their biggest rival. Eita was the leader and he made the decisions. The new Triangle Gate champions then imploded, as Hyo and the rest of RED attacked Eita and Ishida. Hyo's hostile takeover ousted their leader and the only remaining founding member. But that wasn't the end either. Ryo Saito emerged, announcing that there would be one more title defense because one member of RED hadn't wrestled that night. SB Kento would have a surprise Brave Gate title defense. And suddenly, for the first time in 6 weeks, an unmasked Dragon Dia appeared, riding a skateboard to the ring and looking happier than ever. He immediately took it to SB Kento while the remaining members of RED attempted to stop him from winning. With the referee again distracted, Hyo got up on the ring with the bucket of powder, ready to blind Dragon Dia. But after an equally long absence, Dia Inferno ran to ringside, mask and all. He motioned for Hyo to give him the powder, and then Dragon Dia quickly hit his finishing move on SB Kento and became the new Brave Gate champion. Yuki Yoshioka once again unmasked and faced off with Dragon Dia. But things were a little different this time. Their long feud was over now that they were both unmasked and no longer had the shadow of their characters' rivalry hanging over them. In only a few minutes' time, Dragon Gate had paid off nearly every storyline that had been building up for the past 2 to 3 years. The following night, Dragon Dia and Yuki Yoshioka defeated Hyo and SB Kento for the Twin Gate titles, with Yoshioka outside of the dragon costume for the first time in over a year and in the best shape of his life. Dragon Gate veteran Naruki Doi announced that he would be forming a new unit. He saw the troubles happening in Masquerade and offered Kota Minoura the centerpiece position of his new group, which would later be named Gold Class. Minoura repeatedly turned him down, stating that he needed to take care of business in Masquerade first before giving him an answer. But he agreed to team together for just one match against RED with their newest member Shun Skywalker, and despite all the events of the past 24 hours, Shun kept insisting that Masquerade could still be whole again if only Minoura would finally apologize, calling him a spoiled brat and expecting every opportunity to be given to him. Finally, at the February Korakuen Hall show, RED declared that since Eita was gone and they had a completely new lineup now, they would rename themselves for a new generation. On the same show, Jason Lee and Kota Minoura tagged for the last time as Masquerade, then agreed to go their separate ways as Minoura finally accepted Naruki Doi's offer. Jason Lee and La Estrella also had one final match, but failed to capture the Twin Gate titles and also agreed to separate. After more than a year of mutual dominance, feuding, and crumbling from the inside, both Masquerade and RED were dead. Now, this could have been the end. In fact, when I was making this video, I originally planned for it to be the end. But the story of Masquerade still didn't end there. Following Kota Minoura's membership to Gold Class, where this happened, Jason Lee found himself as the hottest free agent on the roster. Shun Skywalker made an offer to bring Jason Lee back to his side in Z-Brats, but other rival units Natural Vibes and High End quickly advised Jason not to listen to Shun and offered memberships to their own units. Whoever won a 3-way elimination match in April would get exclusive negotiation rights with Jason Lee. Over the weeks that followed, Shun Skywalker's character work was fantastic, towing the line between hilarious and terrifying. He became extremely possessive about Jason, referring to him as his property and saying that he shouldn't have to fight for something that's already his. He would incessantly bully Jason and physically separate him from the other units so they couldn't even speak to him, sometimes even carrying him around the arena. But he would also protect Jason and gaslight him into believing Shun was the only one who cared about him and that he's nothing without him. Jason Lee meanwhile had trial runs in tagging with both Natural Vibes and High End members, but it led to a series of miscommunications, accidentally causing them to lose their matches. One night, Jason lost his temper and yelled at them to apologize, in the exact same way that Shun Skywalker had done to Kota Minoura. When Jason finally realized what he was doing, he was mortified. Shun addressed Ryo Saito and demanded to know why he hadn't been allowed to tag with Jason when the other units had matches with him. Unsurprisingly, being former teammates in Masquerade, Shun and Jason worked very well together, but Jason looked disgusted with himself whenever they'd win. Dragon Dia even spoke up, warning Jason that he was walking down a dark path. Shun continued his gaslighting and said this wasn't the Dragon Dia he knew in Masquerade. He's the one who tore apart Masquerade, and he blamed all of what happened on Dia. Most members of the other units also came on a bit too strongly, but Natural Vibes leader KZ gave Jason one piece of advice.
Don't think, feel.
Leading up to the negotiation rights match, Jason started showing more of a dark edge. Where before he'd looked miserable, he now looked cold and devoid of emotion. Where he used to have to be dragged to the ring to be in Shun's corner, he now walked by his side willingly. Jason even declared that he would refuse to join High End even if they won the negotiation rights. At the April Korakuen Hall show, Jason Lee had a match against longtime friend and mentor, fellow Hong Kong wrestler Ho Ho Lun. But the ominous insane specter of Shun Skywalker was in Jason's corner now, and Jason cheated to win against his friend. It seemed like his corruption was finally complete. Later that night in the negotiation rights match, the finish to the match saw a simultaneous double pin between Natural Vibes and Z-Brats, meaning Jason would now have to choose between the two. Natural Vibes made their case, offering new Jason Lee merchandise in their team colors, and their youngest member, Jackie Funky Kame, even learned Jason's native Cantonese to ask him to join. But mirroring Shun's heel turn in January, Jason finally joined Z-Brats. Or did he? Jason finally declared that Shun does not own him, and that he was only pretending to be on his side. He then declared that he was joining Natural Vibes, and yes, he later apologized to Ho Ho Lun. If Shun was bordering on madness before, this completely broke his brain. Shun and his old rival Diamante teamed up to focus on the Twin Gate belts, and defeated Dragon Dia and Yuki Yoshioka in a match that reflected their Apuestas tag match, but with the alliances switched this time. But despite the loss, Yoshioka went on to defeat both Shun and Diamante individually in the King of Gate tournament, as well as Kota Minoura in the finals, which guaranteed his first ever Dream Gate title shot. Kota Minoura began acting more entitled, and found a way to wedge himself into the Dream Gate title picture as well, even though he didn't earn it, which kind of proved Shun Skywalker right about him. The best villains always have a salient point. La Estrella left Japan for a North American excursion and worked indie dates all over North America on an absolutely tireless schedule. As part of his apology to Ho Ho Lun, Jason Lee agreed to form a Hong Kong martial arts themed side project called Kung Fu Masters, who would only appear in Kobe to appeal to the city's sizable Chinese population. Leading up to the biggest event of the year, Shun Skywalker began treating Jackie like a new toy to play with. If you wondered what he'd do when he ran out of ex-Masquerade members to harass, there's your answer. Shun's weird, y'all. At Kobe World, while Dragon Dia lost his Bravegate title to Hyo, Yuki Yoshioka finally defeated Kai for his first ever Dreamgate title, and successfully defended it against Kota Minoura the next night. Jason and Jackie challenged Shun and Diamante for the Twin Gate titles, representing Kung Fu Masters instead of Natural Vibes because Kobe World is, in fact, in Kobe. And as Kung Fu Masters aren't a full-time unit and generally aren't taken that seriously, the challengers went into the match as complete underdogs, but they managed to pull off a match that many people are describing as the best match of the year. In case you've come this far and still don't know the term kayfabe, it's old carny slang referring to the fiction maintained by wrestling. To my knowledge, the real-life Shun Skywalker is not a terrifying, cackling stalker, but for most wrestlers in lucha, the mask is the character, and it seems like Shun Skywalker takes that more literally than most luchadors. Because as talented as the performer behind the mask is, the kayfabe of Shun Skywalker is a man who hid his true self behind a persona. A man who was so obsessed with reaching the top that when he couldn't make it, he walked away in shame, followed in the footsteps of his mentors by perfecting his craft in Mexico, then returned to Japan and immediately found success, surrounding himself with other young talents just like him. But it's no accident that he formed a unit called Masquerade, because as soon as the mask started to crack, so did he. And when that mask broke, so did he. Shun's deranged obsessions will likely continue, and since pro wrestling never really ends, I had to stop somewhere. But the epic story of Masquerade was easily one of the best long-term storylines I've ever seen in wrestling. It dovetailed perfectly with other stories and subplots, and it led to some incredible matches along the way. That's why I watch. That's the kind of entertainment that makes it worth following our silly fake punch sport. And that's why I say Dragon Gate is the best wrestling promotion that most Western fans aren't watching. So if you like fast-paced, high-flying action, great storytelling, lucha libre, or strong style, I just have one question. Why aren't you watching this?